You know that saying, blood is thicker than water? Yeah. Whoever came up with that never met my mother. I grew up in a small two-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was home. At least, it used to be. My mom raised me on her own after my dad left when I was barely 5. She worked 2 jobs, scraped by, and used to say that I was her whole world. For years, I believed her. But then he showed up. His name was Todd. My mom called him her boyfriend, but to me, he was a parasite in cheap cologne and a leather jacket that always smelled faintly of cigarettes. He was older than her, maybe by 10 years, with slicked back hair, a constant smirk, and a way of looking at people that made your skin crawl, like he was calculating how much he could get from you. At first, I tried to stay out of their way, but I noticed things, like how my mom's laugh got quieter when he was around, how she'd check her phone constantly, her fingers trembling like she was waiting for his approval, or how money, our money, started disappearing from the coffee jar we kept for rent. Todd wasn't just bad news, he was the headline. The worst part? My mom couldn't or wouldn't see it. Every time I tried to warn her, she'd snap, "You don't know him like I do. He's been through a lot." Yeah, so had we. One night, though, everything shifted. It was late. I was lying in bed, headphones in, when I heard voices from the living room. My mom's voice was low, shaky. Todd's was sharp, like a whip. I pulled my headphones off. "I just need a little more," he said. "You'll get it back, I promise." "You said that last time," she whispered. "That was different." His tone was cold now. "If you really loved me, you wouldn't make this such a big deal." Something inside me twisted. My hands clenched the bedsheets. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control. And I swear to you, in that moment, I made a silent promise. I don't care how long it takes. I will get him out of our lives. I just didn't know how far that promise would take me, or how much damage I'd have to cause to keep it. Before Todd came along, life wasn't easy, but it was ours. My mom and I had this routine. Saturday mornings, we'd hit the thrift store for clothes and maybe a used book or two. Sunday nights, we'd make pancakes for dinner, just because we could. We didn't have much, but we had this unspoken bond, like two survivors who'd learned to find joy in scraps. That all faded when Todd arrived. At first, he tried to charm me. He'd bring me little gifts, knockoff sunglasses, a phone case with peeling paint, a baseball cap that smelled like it had lived in someone else's closet for years. I'd mumble a thanks, but my gut told me there was a catch. I was right. He started showing up more and more, until he was basically living with us. His stuff took over the hallway closet. His boots sat by the door like they owned the place. And somehow, his voice became the loudest sound in our home. One evening, I came home from school to find my Xbox gone. "Where's my console?" I asked. My mom froze for half a second before answering. "We sold it. For bills." "We?" I asked, but I already knew. Todd didn't even bother to look up from the couch. "You're old enough to not waste time on games anyway." My blood boiled. That Xbox was something I'd saved up for. Mowing lawns, babysitting, doing odd jobs. It wasn't theirs to sell. But Mom just avoided my eyes. That was the first real crack in the foundation between us. The second came a week later when I saw Todd yelling at her in the kitchen. He wasn't even hiding it. She stood there, hands gripping the counter, while he berated her for nagging about rent. And then I noticed the bruise. It was faint, just below her collarbone, but I saw it. She caught me looking and quickly adjusted her shirt, forcing a smile. "Don't worry about it, honey. I wish I could tell you I blew up right there, called the cops, kicked him out, but I didn't. I was 17, barely old enough to fight someone like him, and completely dependent on my mom. So I kept my head down. But in my mind, I was building a case. I started keeping track. Every time he borrowed money, every item that disappeared from our apartment, every lie he told my mom, I wrote it all down in a cheap notebook I kept hidden in my backpack. Because here's the thing about me. I don't like losing, and I especially don't like watching someone I love get destroyed in slow motion. The night that cemented my plan came in late November. The air outside was sharp and cold, and I was lying awake at 2 a.m. when I heard the sound of drawers opening in my mom's room. I crept to the doorway and saw him, rifling through her purse. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. He turned unfazed. "Go back to bed, kid. That's my mom's." Before I could finish, he stepped toward me. Not fast, but enough to make my chest tighten. His smile was the worst part. Calm, mocking, like he knew I couldn't do a damn thing. I said, "Go to bed." I did, but not because he scared me, because that was the moment I realized something important. Todd wasn't just an inconvenience or a bad influence. He was a threat, and I was going to remove that threat permanently. I wish I could tell you that I just brushed it off, that I told myself, hey, maybe I'm overreacting. But no, that gut feeling was relentless, gnawing at me like a constant itch I couldn't scratch. Every little thing he did seemed off, like how he'd hover around Mom when she cooked, offering to help, but mostly just leaning in too close. Or how his eyes would flick to me whenever I walked into the room, like he was measuring me, testing me. One evening, Mom invited me to join them for a movie night in the living room. She was on one end of the couch, he was on the other, and the only open spot was in between. I almost made an excuse to leave, but I sat down. Big mistake. Halfway through the movie, I felt something. A light touch on my arm. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't casual. And the way he pulled back when I looked at him, yeah, it was intentional. That night, I locked my bedroom door. For the first time ever. Over the next few days, I started taking mental notes. Like I was building a case file in my head. Times, dates, weird comments, physical proximity, all of it. I didn't know exactly what my plan was, but I knew one thing. If this guy thought he could slide into our lives and mess with my family, he had another thing coming. And that's when I started digging, not just into his behavior, but into his past. I'm not a private investigator, but I've watched enough late-night true crime documentaries to know the basics. If you want to really know someone, don't just listen to what they tell you. Find out what they don't. The first stop was his social media. His Facebook was mostly public, which was either reckless or overconfident. Photos of him with random people, different women in different cities, but never the same face twice. Old party shots from 5, 6 years ago. Drinks in his hand, arms slung around someone's shoulder. The kind of pictures that scream, "I'm the fun guy." But the captions, they felt off. Then I saw something that froze me. A photo from 3 years ago. Him at a barbecue, with his arm around a woman who looked eerily like Mom. Not Mom, obviously, but same hair color, similar smile. The caption? Some things never change. No tags, no comments from the woman. Creepy. I went deeper. Scrolled through tagged posts, comments on other people's walls, even an old MySpace page he'd forgotten to delete. And that's when I found her. A woman named Danielle. She looked tired in her profile picture. Her Facebook was private, but her Instagram wasn't. Buried in her grid was a picture from about 4 years ago. Her sitting on the floor next to a broken lamp, tears in her eyes, captioned, "Sometimes walking away is the only option left." Something told me she wasn't talking about redecorating. I DM'd her. Didn't think she'd respond, but she did, within an hour. Her first message was short. "Is he with someone new now?" I told her yes, my mom. She didn't even type back right away. Just sent me a phone number and wrote, "Call me. I can't put this in writing." I stared at the phone number on my screen for a good 5 minutes before I worked up the nerve to dial it. It's not that I was scared to talk to her. It's that I had this gnawing pit in my stomach telling me, once you hear what she has to say, there's no going back. When she picked up, she didn't say hello, just a sharp, tired sounding, "Is he still charming?" I didn't know how to answer that. Charming wasn't the word I'd use. Manipulative fit better, but yeah, he still had my mom smiling like a teenager in a rom-com. She sighed. A deep, defeated sigh, like she'd been carrying a weight for years. "Listen," she said, "I dated him for just over a year, and that was a year of my life I still haven't fully gotten back." Her voice had that mix of anger and exhaustion you only hear from people who've been burned badly. She started telling me stories, and not in a linear way, more like each memory was bubbling up and spilling over. First, the little lies, how he'd forgotten to tell her he was seeing other people, how he'd take money from her wallet, swear he didn't, then magically replace it days later so she'd think she was losing her mind. Then came the controlling behavior, the guilt trips if she wanted to see her friends, the innocent jokes about her weight, her clothes, her job, jokes that stopped being funny after the 10th time. And then the part that made me clench my jaw so hard I thought I'd crack a tooth. "He has a pattern," she said. "He finds women who are either newly divorced or widowed. Women who are lonely but still have something to their name. Money, a house, something he can eventually get his hands on. He'll make them feel special, then slowly start isolating them. He's patient. He plays the long game." I asked her if it had ever gotten physical. She went quiet. "Not exactly. He's smart enough not to leave bruises, but he'll break things, he'll punch walls, he'll scream in your face, and he's really, really good at making you believe it's your fault." By the time we hung up, my hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage, because suddenly all the little red flags I'd been filing away in my brain about my mom's new boyfriend, the way he'd started joking about how she spent her money, the fact that he always insisted on driving her car instead of his, the way he'd gotten her to cancel a trip with her best friend because it wasn't the right time. It all clicked. This wasn't just a bad boyfriend. This was a predator. And if Danielle was right, he already had a plan for my mom. After I hung up with Danielle, I just sat there for a while, staring at the wall. My brain was firing in 100 directions at once. Part of me wanted to storm over to my mom's house and tell her everything right then and there. But another part of me, the colder, more deliberate part, knew that would backfire. If he really was as manipulative as Danielle described, he'd twist it. He'd paint me as the jealous, overprotective kid who didn't want her to be happy. He'd pull her closer and push me out, and then I'd have zero way to protect her. So instead, I made a decision. I'd play along, I'd smile when he cracked those not-so-funny jokes. I'd nod when he told the same "How I Met Your Mom" story for the 15th time. I'd let him think I was warming up to him, because if he thought I was on his side, he wouldn't see me coming. Step one was to learn his patterns. I started showing up at my mom's place more often. Casual drop-ins, offering to help with stuff around the house. I'd watch how he acted when she was in the room versus when she wasn't. I noticed little things right away. If she left the room, his entire demeanor changed, like flipping a switch. His smile would drop, his eyes would go flat, and he'd suddenly find some excuse to criticize me. But the second she came back, boom, Mr. Charming again. He was also getting more comfortable making decisions for her. He'd answer questions directed at her. He'd intercept phone calls. And twice, I caught him opening her mail before she got to it. Step two was information gathering. I got a cheap burner phone and started recording audio whenever I was around him. I wasn't looking for anything dramatic. I knew predators like him don't usually expose themselves in one big moment. Instead, I was building a pattern, a collection of small, sharp knives I could use all at once. I also started digging into his past. Online court records, property searches, social media posts. He was slippery. Not much on Facebook except generic family BBQ photos. But buried in a county record site, I found something interesting. 3 separate eviction filings in the past 10 years. 2 different counties, always under slightly different versions of his name. This guy was a drifter. He'd move in, drain someone dry, and vanish. Step 3 was setting the trap. I had to find a way to make him comfortable enough to slip, to get careless. So I offered him something, or rather, I made it look like I did. I told him I was thinking about investing in a side business, but didn't know where to start. Said I had about $15,000 saved up and was looking for advice. The bait wasn't even fully out before his eyes lit up. Oh man, I've been meaning to tell you about an opportunity. And just like that, I knew I had him. The very next time I saw him, he brought it up before I even had a chance. "Hey," he said casually, leaning back in his chair like we were old buddies. "About that money you mentioned. I might know a way to double it in under 6 months." I just nodded like a curious idiot. "Really? How?" He gave me the pitch. Something about a friend in real estate who had access to distressed properties where all we needed was quick cash for flipping. No contracts, no agents, just under-the-table deals. I pretended to be intrigued but nervous. That hesitation seemed to make him lean in harder, like he was teaching me some forbidden secret. He even dangled an extra hook. "If this goes well, I could get your mom in on it too. She's been looking for ways to stretch her retirement, right?" That line alone made my blood boil. He wasn't satisfied with my imaginary 15K. He wanted her savings too. From that point on, I acted like I needed convincing. I'd ask dumb questions, accidentally misunderstand terms, and make him explain everything twice. All the while, I was recording everything. He never suspected. He thought I was just financially clueless. I also made sure every conversation happened in person or over speakerphone in public places. Why? Because I wanted witnesses, casual bystanders who could confirm hearing bits of the scheme. If it ever went legal, I didn't want him wriggling out by claiming I misunderstood him. After 2 weeks of warming up to the idea, I told him I was ready, but with a small twist. I said, "Before I hand over the money, I want to run it past a friend of mine. He's really good with contracts and stuff." He looked uneasy, but forced a smile. "Oh, sure, but this deal's kind of time sensitive. I'd hate for too many people to know about it." That was my confirmation. No legit investment is afraid of a second opinion. Here's where I went full surgical. I told him I couldn't liquidate my savings right away, but that I could put down a $2,000 good faith deposit to hold the deal. He jumped at it. What he didn't know was that the $2,000 was fake, prop cash, the kind used in movies. We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown, neutral ground. I picked it because it had big glass windows, decent foot traffic, and one other reason. My friend I mentioned? Yeah, he wasn't really a friend. He was a private investigator I'd hired 2 weeks earlier. This guy was ex-law enforcement, knew every trick in the book, and most importantly, knew exactly how to make someone talk without laying a hand on them. When I walked in, fake cash neatly stacked in an envelope, the PI was already seated at the far corner table with a laptop open. To anyone else, he looked like a guy working on emails. To me, he was a loaded gun without a trigger pull. The scammer strolled in 10 minutes late, wearing that smug smile he probably practiced in the mirror. We shook hands, sat down, and I slid the envelope across the table like I was handing over my future. He peeked inside, counted quickly, and his smile widened. "Perfect. We can get started right away." That's when I gave the signal. Just a subtle scratch of my ear. The PI stood up, walked over, and sat down next to me. "Hey, mind if I join?" he said casually, not even looking at the scammer. The scammer blinked. Who are you?" "Name's not important," the PI said, flipping his laptop around to face him. On the screen, every single recording I'd made of him pitching the fake investment, asking for my mother's money, and suggesting I keep it off the books. The scammer froze. His eyes darted between me and the PI like he was trying to calculate how bad this could get. "You know," the PI said calmly, "I could walk these down to the DA's office today. Wire fraud, elder financial abuse, minimum 5 years if they press hard. But what? He leaned forward. I'm willing to make a deal. The scammer swallowed. What deal? That's when I dropped the real hammer. You're going to pay me $1,000 real cash for my good faith deposit back, plus an additional $5,000 for the trouble. If you don't, these files go to the police and every single person in your little network. The PI didn't break eye contact. This isn't a negotiation. The scammer stammered, but I could see the panic setting in. He knew we had him cornered. No police station visit meant no headlines, no ruined reputation, but it also meant coughing up cash he probably didn't want to part with. After a long, tense pause, he nodded. Fine, give me a week. We gave him 3 days. And you know what? On day 3, he showed up at the same cafe, handed me an envelope twice as thick as the one I'd given him, and walked out without a word. I never saw him again, but I know he saw me. Or rather, the idea of me every time he thought about pulling that scam on someone else. When I got home with that envelope, I didn't even count the money right away. I just sat in my kitchen staring at it. It wasn't just paper and ink. It was proof that I'd turned the tables on someone who preyed on trust. I thought about my mom. She had no idea any of this happened. To her, I was just busy with work. I decided she never needed to know. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I didn't want her carrying the weight of betrayal. The next morning, I deposited the money into a separate account, not for me, but for her future medical expenses. Every dollar was a silent promise. No one will ever take advantage of you again. As for the scammer, the PI kept tabs on him for a while. He didn't disappear, but his little investment business suddenly stopped targeting people in our area. Word travels fast in the underground. Apparently, no one wanted to do business with someone who might be working with law enforcement. I didn't need him in jail. I needed him to live with the knowledge that he'd been beaten at his own game. That somewhere out there, a person he thought was a mark had become the hunter. The strange thing, I didn't feel the rush I expected. No fireworks, no fist-pumping victory, just quiet. The kind of quiet you get after a storm tears through and you're left staring at the wreckage, except this time, the wreckage wasn't mine. If there's one thing I learned, it's this. Revenge isn't about making them hurt the way they hurt you. It's about taking back control. It's about sending the message, even if it's only whispered, that you are not prey. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge is leaving them alive with their fear. If you want, I can give you a part 10, reflective wrap-up, which ties everything together in a way that hits hard for your YouTube audience and leaves them with goosebumps. It'll be that last chilling paragraph that lingers in their heads after the video ends. It's been months now. Life went back to its normal rhythm. Work, coffee, calls with mom. But every once in a while, late at night, I think about that man. And I wonder, does he ever lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment he realized he'd been outplayed? Because I remember my moment. I remember the crushing weight in my chest when I first saw what he'd done to my mom's savings. That sick metallic taste of helplessness. It burned into me so deep that even now, I can recall the exact shade of the lamplight in my living room that night. And then, I remember the flip, the first spark of an idea, the steady building of a plan. And the day I finally stood face to face with him, calm, smiling, and holding the strings he didn't even know were around his neck. That's the thing about revenge people don't talk about. It's not a sprint. It's not even a marathon. It's a hunt. Patience is your weapon, and silence is your camouflage. When you finally step out of the shadows, you don't need to roar. You just need to let them know, in the smallest of ways, that you were there the whole time. And as I sat across from him that day, watching him sign over the money, I didn't see a predator anymore. I saw a man realizing, maybe for the first time in his life, that he wasn't untouchable. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. They can take your money, they can take your time, they can even take your trust. But if you stay sharp, keep your patience, and pick your moment, you can take everything back and more. Because in the end, the quietest hunter is the one they never see coming.